Hi, everyone. My name is Vandana Ora, and I am the host of Adult Child in Recovery, moving from insanity to serenity and recovery. So I'm happy today to introduce everyone to my very special guest today. Um, this is Phyllis Leavitt. And Phyllis, I just learned recently, wrote an amazing book that she's going to happily share about America in Therapy. That's actually the title of the book. It's a new approach to hope and healing for a nation in crisis. And I think this is the divine time, especially now with what's happening on the planet, to really share your book. And Phyllis, is it okay if I just tell everybody a little bit about you and
Sure.
read your bio quickly?
Sure.
Okay. So Phyllis Leavitt has a master's degree in psychology and counseling from Antioch University. She co-directed the Parents United Sexual Abuse Treatment Program in Santa Fe, New Mexico for 2 years, and then went into private practice full time. Phyllis has treated children, families, couples, and individual adults for 34 years. Wow, that's a long time.
A long time.
She's also worked extensively with abuse and dysfunctional family dynamics, and that is definitely at the heart of my work and the reason why I have this podcast to begin with. So let's offer hope to people who grew up in dysfunctional families, right? Which is a lot more than we ever thought it was from the statistics. Maybe you know what the percentage is, but I've heard it's pretty high and it's pretty common. So anyway, Phyllis also let me just go back. Mhm. So she's worked with dysfunctional family dynamics, their aftermath, and some of the most important elements for healing. And Phyllis has published two books, A Light in the Darkness. I love that title. And Into the Fire. Beautiful. As a podcast guest, Phyllis is here to talk about her latest book, as I kind of gave it away a little bit before, America in Therapy, a new approach to hope and healing for a nation in crisis. Yeah, and Phyllis lives with her husband in Taos, New Mexico. I've always wanted to visit there. She's retired from her psychotherapy practice now, but focuses on writing and speaking. Sounds like a beautiful life you're living. So again, thank you for this, coming on my show and really like offering hope and talking about American therapy. Can I ask you what inspired you to write this book?
Totally. And that's really a good place to start because I think it's our inspiration that, probably sources for most people our greatest gifts. And my inspiration for writing the book came sort of a couple of layers. One is that I had my own childhood trauma that I spent many years in therapy working on and recovering from. And it was an amazing process. It was not an easy process, but it was a really profoundly life-changing process for me. And so when I say a light in the darkness, I feel like those are the words that kind of epitomized my own journey of finding light in some of the darkness of my life, which and just to speak to something you brought up earlier, I have found that dysfunction and abuse and neglect and a lot of pain in families is rampant in America. I think that our families are really suffering, and as individuals, we suffer the legacy of that. So my own years of going to therapy, I decided to become a therapist. And what I realized from the work that I did was that I wasn't alone, which is often the feeling that people have from their own traumas. That not only was I not alone, but that there are millions of people all over the world, not just in the United States, suffering all kinds of trauma, whether it's family trauma or the traumas of poverty or the traumas of discrimination and war and lack of education or lack of adequate resources or even food. And these are all traumas. And that I was fortunate enough to be able to find help. And the understanding that there are millions of people in our country and in the world who don't have access to help made me realize that not only is that terrible in and of itself, but that we have millions of symptomatic people then, because trauma that is untreated, and when people are not rescued from trauma at human hands, they become symptomatic. And my work as a therapist, my work with myself, and my work, with many, many, many clients over the years has shown me what some of those symptoms of untreated trauma are. And as I began to look at that on a societal level, it became so clear to me that some of the dynamics in our country, and I call that the family of America, because we're all family systems, our families of origin, our school systems, our communities, sometimes our houses of worship, businesses. We all operate on family systems dynamics. And so do states, and so do governments, and so do our largest institutions. And the real inspiration for writing America in Therapy, then, as sort of the top layer of everything I just said, is that I realized that a lot of the dynamics coming down from the top in our country are the dynamics of a dysfunctional and sometimes very abusive family, and that we're all at the effects of that, even if we're not necessarily ourselves the direct recipients of some of the most hurtful policies and practices and behaviors. And that was really my inspiration for the book. So please jump in and
My goodness, I have so many ideas and thoughts just like shooting around my brain. Um well, I just want to say that I'm a member of adult children of alcoholics and dysfunctional families. I created my own group, my own little like very small intimate circle, kind of like a women's healing circle, and we meet on Zoom, and we've been meeting since last November, so it's almost a year now, and it's really changed my life. I mean, and not always, there's still, the voices of my inner critic and, those troublemakers, even though they're protective parts. But all in all, I have to say that people have really noticed when I'm doing the inner work, which you said, and I agree wholeheartedly, it's not easy work. And I've avoided doing this work for most of my life until a couple of years ago. And I just happened to buy a book. I don't remember the author's name. You probably know it. It's something having to do with emotionally immature and unavailable or narcissistic parents being raised
right.
by those kind of people, and that we're actually called survivors. And
Right.
I'm reading it and I'm like, yes, I can identify this and that. But I pretty much knew that if I were to really consciously admit how much harm and how much harm I've suffered and how much trauma, like, that I've experienced and still experience, it would be hell. Like I wouldn't be able to deal with it. I would just like really fall apart, which actually is not the case when you're in a community, when you
That,
grieve together. And I knew I couldn't do it alone. And it made me very sad. It brought up a lot of grief and loss and, never really having that idyllic childhood. But I knew that I couldn't ignore it anymore. So that's where I'm at. And I'm also in ACA, and one of my episodes, maybe about a month ago, I spoke with someone and we identified the 14 traits, the character traits of an adult child. And for a long time, I wouldn't even admit on all of our meetings when we would introduce ourselves, because it's based on a 12 step, but I also had an aversion to 12-step programs because of my history with my marriage and all of that. So I didn't want to admit for the longest time, like, I'm not calling myself an adult child. I'm not going to identify with that because that feels like I'm powerless. But step number one is admitting you're powerless, not now, but then, that we were powerless over the situation, the circumstances, and that it wasn't our fault. So anyway, getting back to my point, which I'm trying to remember, it's about offering hope
yeah.
and healing because I would say the world is in crisis. Our planet
Work
is
in Christ.
definitely in crisis. The collective is in crisis. And it's like, so what are your like what do you suggest as
Yeah.
I mean, besides just obviously therapy is important, but even therapy can be triggering if you're not matched with the right therapist. I've also been going to therapy on and off since my divorce, which was like over 20 years ago. But I wonder, like in your book, how do you see a solution being found?
Well,
And
I mean, that's a very complex question, of course, because there's no one answer. If there was, we'd
right,
have it. Um,
yeah,
but I think I think what I would start by saying is, I think we need a combination, and this is what I tried to accomplish in my book, a combination of really accurately looking at the problem. If you go to the doctor because you're in pain, they can't treat you until they diagnose what is causing the pain. And the better the diagnosis, the better the possibility of cure or relief, right? And
yeah,
so half of my book, in a way, is devoted to really looking at how our nation is in a crisis. And really, it's the human race that's in a crisis.
yes,
Um, but I talk about America because I live here and this is the country I'm familiar with, and I'm not in a position to talk about other countries in detail. But really, what I'm talking about is the world. And I think with the most recent events, we realize that it's a global human race problem that we're facing, and it's very extreme. It's very life-threatening, and it's extremely life-threatening for the people on the front lines, obviously. um,
yes,
we're all a part of this human race, and we're all a part of either the problem or the solution, and that's the approach I take, because as you said, so many people feel powerless. And I think we have to find what our true power is. So, backtracking, um, I feel like what the approach is to really have the most accurate diagnosis, and then look at what we know from the field of psychology actually interrupts the cycle of violence and abuse. What helps stop it and what helps heal it? And the point of my book is to try to take those principles of the best psychology and the best family systems therapy and systems theory to our larger institutions and ultimately to the government and to the world. Because as I said, we're all family systems and we're all being affected by the dynamics of the families we live in, which are now global. Um, and so I talk a lot about, and so let me just say this, because this is one of the important things I think, is that we're being conditioned in the news and in the media and in all the information we're being flooded with and sort of bombarded with on a daily basis to kind of believe that these are ideological issues and that there's these huge ideological conflicts that can't be resolved in any other way besides war. And it's not true. These are mental health issues. And the reason why I say that is this, that mentally healthy people do not murder other people. They do not invade other people's homes or kidnap their children or
mhm,
or steal their resources or force them to follow some religion that they don't follow. Mentally healthy people don't do these things.
mhm,
And so we have to look at what creates mental health and what actually creates the mental illness that is
mhm,
running so much of our policy and practice that is clearly not working. And if we were looking, so I take the model of an individual family and I use that to look at our larger family systems. In an individual family, if you had a parent that didn't feed one of their children, or
mhm,
murdered one of their children, or locked one of their children out of the house and never let them back in, or hated one of their children and targeted them with abusive language and abusive, physical abuse, sexual abuse, whatever, we would say that parent was disturbed, deeply disturbed, and we would want them to get help, and we would want them, their children or whoever they affect, to be safe from them. But as a country, we do the same things to other people and to people in our own country. We discriminate against certain groups. We withhold resources from some of the most needy people and the most marginalized people, the most disadvantaged people in our country. We ostracize people. We hate people. We do to ourselves, let alone whatever we do in the rest of the world, we do to people in our own country what we would never want to have be done to ourselves. And that is a mental health issue and a mental health crisis. And so that's what I address in my book. And I look at what are the dynamics of a dysfunctional or abusive family and how are they playing out on larger scales. And then I look at what are the symptoms of people who, and you're probably with your 14 points that you were talking about, have some of them outlined. What are the symptoms of people who don't get help, who are targeted, who are misused, who are disadvantaged, who are discriminated against, who are attacked? What are their symptoms? And of course, I could talk for hours about all of this. I wrote a whole book. And then what happens when they're not treated? What can we expect?
Well, we see what's happening now on the planet as an outcome of, brushing it under the rug and ignoring the systems or denying that there was a problem, growing up, or whatever. So we see what's
Exactly.
happening. And this is to the extreme, unfortunately, and that
And this is what
everyone
happens
suffers.
when we let it go, because it
Yeah.
becomes extreme.
Yeah.
How does someone in the United States, and this is happening all over the world, but let's just talk about here, how does someone become a mass murderer?
Mhm.
How does that happen? How does a person become so disconnected from themselves, from any sense of humanity, from any connection to other people, that they would feel that that was all that was left for them to do? Because we also know that many of the mass shooters end up committing suicide. So it's really a suicidal, homicidal gesture. What happens to a person that leaves them that bereft of their own humanity and connection to other human beings? And we have to ask that question instead of blame them. I mean,
Yeah.
yes, we don't want mass murderers. And if someone is apprehended after they commit a mass murder, of course, we want them separated from society. But we have to look at what caused it and heal it. And in every other area of our lives, we do that. If I have a pain in my body, I go to a doctor and I hope to be healed. If my computer breaks, I go to a computer technician and I hope he can fix my computer. If my car breaks down, I go to a mechanic. In every area of our lives, except human relations, we want the fix, we want the cure, we want the highest functioning, except in human relations. We're still in this old paradigm of
Mhm.
conquest and domination and right
It's
and
like
wrong.
the limbic brain, the amygdala is still going off like where everything is viewed as a threat or a danger when it's not. And I
Right.
think and that is the evolutionary survival brain that has served us for thousands of years, but
That's
hasn't for a really long time. It just pushes us away from each other. It separates us. It isolates us. I'm also a member of the Thich Nhat Hanh's Rock Blossom Sangha through Plum Village tradition.
beautiful. Beautiful.
And, he, of course, Thai was an activist, as you probably know about him, in Vietnam after the war. And because of his peace activism, he was exiled from his own country. Um, and then eventually went back before he passed. But I was just reading today an email from Plum Village where they're sharing a video of his where they invited Israelis and Palestinians to come together in an open-hearted, conscious,
Right.
um, dialogue. But that was like in 2003. And that I don't know how often, like I feel like that needs to happen every day, or at least like every month all
Right.
over the world. And that was like,
Right.
it seemed like that was just like a one-time thing, which is great that it was done. It's amazing and it's like inspirational. But yeah, and it's just such a big it makes us what's happening in the world makes us feel so hopeless, at least I do, and scared, and it just like re-triggers all of the old trauma that our ancestors experienced. And I know many people are just really isolating themselves. I mean, first the pandemic, then
Right.
these wars and the unexpected startle response, like it's like, oh no, the gasping for breath. I just feel it's important for everyone to be in therapy and to find the right therapist and the right technique or, just the right match. And so I really appreciate, like, therapists need therapists too, probably
Right.
more than anybody else.
Right.
And so when I saw the title of your book, I was just like, wow. So, I'm going to ask you one last question in a moment, something that just came to me. But as far as therapy, I was also like contemplating my experiences with therapy, and in the collective, but also in the metaphysical community, because I'm a Reiki master, teacher, and spiritual healer, and do all these holistic healing treatments. And I know that in this community, like for the most part, therapists are kind of discouraged, like it's discouraged because traditional talk therapy is generally misunderstood. And it basically, the ideology behind this framework, this mindset, is that you just talk about your problems over and over and over. And the therapist just listens, and then you just keep talking, and it kind of locks it in place even more. And there are no other solutions being given, and it kind of can be even more disempowering or victimizing in some way. I don't find that to be the case. Now, I've been to different types of therapy, and I am an IFS enthusiast. I just wanted to share that with you. My last episode was all about IFS, internal family systems, and that's already been brought to corporations, government systems in a very big way. It's been around for like 40 years, and it kind of stemmed from family systems. So I really applaud, like, and support you, like what you're doing in the world. And I do feel that we're ready. Like, there is no other answer. It has to be
No
brought
other.
out and spread all over the world, because everything is systemic. And it starts
That's
in the home, and it's all over, it spreads all over the planet,
right.
especially to government systems and institutions that have control over the masses.
Totally.
Um, so I really applaud that. And I do feel like therapy is valuable. Of course, just like any other kind of relationship, it might not work in the beginning. Not everyone's going to be a vibrational match, but I think like with patience and trust, which that's one of the 14 character traits. It's called a laundry list of people who are deeply traumatized repeatedly, that there's this distrust in ourselves, this disconnect between us and our higher self, but also others, and that's really tragic. And so, yeah, I mean, I definitely believe that everyone needs a safe person. I was thinking about this earlier too. Whether it's a therapist, a counselor, a pastor, a rabbi, a priest, minister, or just a trusted friend, like a confidant, someone who's safe, someone who's well in mind, body, and spirit. And I feel like everyone needs to open up and not keep it bottled up inside, because we see the results of what happens when anger, hatred, aggression, misunderstandings are not looked
Right.
at or unresolved.
Right.
So I know that's a lot. I just want to ask you, when you say a new approach to hope and healing for a nation in crisis, can you expand a little bit on what you mean by a new approach?
Well, I could expand a lot, but I'll try to make it short.
No, it's
Uh,
okay. We have a few
and
minutes. That's fine.
it's I call it, I say a new approach, but really what I also say is that the answers are lying hidden in plain sight.
Right.
We know a lot. We may not know everything, but we know a lot about what interrupts the cycle of abuse, and we know a lot about what's needed for healing. And you mentioned some of them just now. We need a safe place.
Yes.
People need to be safe. So let me just say, like, I mean, there's just so much to say here. I don't want my mind to race too much. But
No,
one of the
totally.
things that what I say and what I have found in my own healing journey and with all of the people that I have ever worked with as clients and all the people that I know is that what causes the worst dysfunction is injuries to love and belonging. When people
Mhm.
are loved, when they have a safe sense of belonging and being valued and being encouraged and being provided for, and when they learn peaceful conflict resolution skills, and these are all part of love, safety, and belonging,
Yeah.
they don't hate. They don't commit atrocities. They don't steal. They don't kidnap. They don't marginalize other people.
Hmm.
So the basic injuries to love and connection, I'll just say it briefly, are what causes our major dysfunction. And these issues need to be part of political discourse, and they're not. We don't talk about love in political debates. We don't talk about safety. We talk about bombing as, or building up our military and our arsenals as somehow an illusion that this keeps us safe when there's no way that it keeps us safe.
No, it
It
just perpetuates the hate.
right. And it's the same in an individual family. There abuse in a family, beating children, sexually abusing, withholding resources, starving children does not produce safety for anyone. And it certainly doesn't produce safety for our society. So we have to know, and that's why I say it's a new approach. What I would love
Yeah.
to see, I'll just give you one example, is to bring these fundamental needs of all human beings, into policy and practice on the larger levels of the family of America, the family of the world. And I think it really is the only solution. I do, because otherwise we have continued symptoms and we have continued acting out and we have continued violence. And we now have created weapons of such mass destruction that our impulses
Hmm.
to wipe out our enemy could wipe out life as we know it. So our
Mm.
homicidal impulses are suicidal. And these are
Yeah.
huge issues that we need to understand as a general public. And I think the general public could understand them if they were given that information and really understood how the cycle of abuse is perpetuating itself on larger societal levels. So I'll give you a quick example of something that I feel would make all the difference in the world. And there are many, there's 100 things that we need, or 1,000 things that we need to make all the difference in the world. But one would be that we role model deep listening from the top down. Right now, we have probably the most divisive cabinets and legislature that we witnessed in my lifetime anyway. And we
Hmm.
have role models of disrespect and verbal attack and walling each other out and putting down our opponents. And this is being role modeled for our children and our citizenry as how we deal with conflict. There couldn't be anything more dysfunctional happening from the top down in the daily news as a role model of conflict unresolution, I will say. So what I would like to see is a Department of Peace in our government, a Department of Peace in psychology. I would like to see trained facilitators with no partisan agenda, because mental health is not a partisan issue. Mental
Hmm.
health is for everyone. In fact, mental health would be the cure to the great divides in our partisanship right now. I would like to see trained facilitators in Congress facilitating the conversation, holding people to account for the way they communicate, facilitating deep listening, even if the opinions and the policies that they each espouse are worlds apart. Because this is what we do with families. When do
Yes.
couples come to therapy? When they're at war, right? War doesn't work. So we help facilitate deep listening, empathy building, making agreements, compromises, keeping boundaries, respect, and in the ideal world, reconnecting. because that's what's going to save the planet, is when we reconnect to one another and we actually care about each other's well-being. So that's one example, one of many, 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 that, we could do these things if we
Yeah.
had the knowledge to do them, if we had the motivation to do them, and if we had some people in positions of power advocating for them. But we all have a
Right.
vote. So who are we going to vote for? And, of course, I don't know how many great options there are out there, but but but
That's a whole nother conversation, I think, right? Oh my
but we're the
goodness.
citizens. So can we say as a citizenry what we want government to embody? And to do that, we have to have new information about what we actually need. And that's one of the main reasons why I wrote this book. And of course, there's many, but
Oh
that's
my
sort
goodness.
of a nutshell.
Phyllis, you're amazing. I definitely support your work. And if there's any way that I could spread the message to my groups, and social media platforms, and I mean, I'm happy to do so. And I love your idea of training peace facilitators all over the world, um, because it is a collective problem, mental illness. That's what it is. But it also, like, I know also that there are monastics from Plum Village that are invited to UN events and government functions, to facilitate a meditation, but
Hmm.
it's not quite to the point at all where that you were just talking about, where we really need to open people's minds and hearts to, have a look at the future.
Right,
What can happen, if this isn't handled now, if this isn't treated now, if the collective trauma isn't treated now, global trauma.
right.
Um, and so, but the thing is, we have to find these people of power to take back our own power
That's
and to open up and be willing to work together. And definitely, like, I say go for it for sure. I don't know how much work you've done in political, platforms, but whatever it takes, I say go for it. I think
yeah.
this is just the beginning, writing books, giving lectures, being on, podcasts like mine. So this is wonderful work and it's so needed right now more than ever. So, Phyllis,
And
how can, oh, go ahead, please.
I was just going to say, now more than ever, like, if what's happening in the world isn't our biggest wake up call, like,
Oh,
I don't know what is, like, it's
yeah.
it's just beyond imagination what people are capable of when they're hurt
Right.
badly enough, when they're brainwashed into hatred, when they're forced into, violent actions, when their mindset is so colored, or I can't find the words, because it's just so horrifying that they would slaughter innocent people, and it's happening all over the world. This is just the
Right.
latest rendition. This
Yes.
isn't It's not actually anything new. It's just beyond horrifying. And so, like, for me, it's like, pain is what brings people to therapy. Can our world pain bring us as a nation to therapy, to get help, to do it differently, and to use all that we know heals? Because what heals ultimately is love. It really is. It
Mhm.
all boils down to that. There isn't one person born into a human body who doesn't crave love and connection and belonging.
Yeah, I think step by step, and we, never give up. And we just have to keep on doing what we're doing and really believe in this cause. It's a really good, worthy, necessary cause. We have to spread the word to everyone, and see what happens. I mean, we can't just sit back
Right.
and just accept this because it's unacceptable. And it's escalated to a point where we can't ignore it and pretend it's not happening
Exactly.
just because it's not happening,
Right here.
within our neighborhood or community. And
Mhm.
I just sometimes I'm like the last couple of days walking down the street where I live, in Brooklyn, and I'm like, nobody seems to be talking about it or affected. I mean, people just going out. Of course, we have to go on with our lives, but
Right.
um, there is that painful realization that I've experienced after 9/11 that if it
Yeah.
didn't happen like right where you are, it's not real. If
Right.
it doesn't affect you, that's not important to you. Then you're just going to ignore it and like, oh, I'm okay. Even like with COVID, it's like with the pandemic, like thousands of people died, and like there were still a lot of people who don't even believe that it's real. And like, well, what didn't affect me? I'm great. It's like the denial is
Yeah.
insurmountable. It's
Yeah.
really
Yeah.
so frustrating and mind blowing. And I think like it comes down to just acceptance, like name it, claim it, accept that this is really happening. We can't hide or ignore the elephant in the room because it's just going to get madder and louder and more aggressive the more we ignore it. Just
I
like the voices inside of us.
I agree with you 100%. I love what you just said. And I
Thank
agree
you.
with it, and denial is really, the difficulty with denial is that it has become a survival mechanism because the onslaught of what we all are being asked to deal with on a global level is
Hmm.
too much on any given day. And so denial becomes a survival mechanism, but it's not. And so we have to find a way, like you said, I
Hmm.
say it this way. We just have to look that dragon in the face and know it for what it is, and then do our part. And, it doesn't have to be a big part. An individual person doesn't have to run for Congress. They don't
Right.
have to change their whole community. We can just love each other better. We can be kinder to our neighbor. We can be more patient with each other. We can
Yep.
help when we can. We can give money to a homeless person or whatever. We can all be part of a solution. You don't have to be a therapist. You don't have to be a legislator. And if you're called to do those things, do them. We need you.
Yeah, just even one small step every day to
Right.
change the reality of our nation, and to wake people up who are sleeping and who are frozen. Because
Yep.
you're right, it is the sympathetic nervous system, the fight, flight, freeze, the
Mhm.
numbing that we've really become um sort of, is it desensitized or sensitized
Oh,
to
yeah.
trauma, right?
Yeah,
Like it's almost like, no, no, I'm not looking. I can't deal with it. Like not another, you know,
exactly. Exactly. And
horrible
that's
or
actually a
scary. Like I
trauma.
can't.
That's
Right.
a trauma outcome,
It is.
that
It is.
I freeze, that I can't deal, that I don't
Yep.
want to look, that I compartmentalize myself off, and that I feel powerless and I protect myself by denial. And these are known trauma outcomes. And so we are being traumatized by what's happening, even if we're not in the line of fire. And the other main outcome for people, and this is, huge, and I talk about this a lot in my book, is that
Mhm.
one of them is learned helplessness and freezing, and one of them is identification with the aggressor and becoming part of,
Yeah.
those who want to bully and dominate because they feel so powerless that it's how they get a sense of power. And we have more and
Mm.
more and more of both of these happening in our country and around the world. And this is the
Mm.
mental health crisis.
Those are the in internal family systems, Dr.
Yeah.
Dick Schwartz. So he calls those parts like the bullies
Right,
or the
right,
troublemakers, the firefighters are the ones that are like, no, we have to do something right now. And then all the managers that say, like kind of try to keep everything in check to keep us safe. But
right,
I think, like you said, I totally agree. I'm right with you. Like, just one action step that we can take to make a
right,
difference,
right,
and what you just said about the the tyrant, like we becoming the tyrant that raised us or that we witnessed growing up, who seemed powerful but really was just like a scared,
right, right,
exiled, wounded child. So there's a flip side to the 14 traits of ACA, the adult child, which is we become the victimizer when we've been
Right.
victimized. And that, to me, that laundry list is even scarier.
Well, and that's
Right? Because it's so
happening. See?
unconscious. And it is,
Yep.
we're all acting out unconsciously.
That's right. That's right.
There has to be something's got to change. I mean, we cannot keep going on and on like this because it is escalating day by day. And so the work that you do is so important. I mean, the work that I do is so important too, but together we're definitely stronger.
Yes.
So, well, Phyllis, I feel like we could talk for hours about this, such an important subject, something that we have to pay attention to. And so I really congratulate you for putting it out there in this way. And I know that you're going to keep going and until you're heard,
Yeah.
because
Gonna keep
that's
going.
also, yeah, let's keep
We can
going.
do. That's what you're doing. And I
That's
really would say that I really appreciate your expertise in all of this. So it's been really enlivening to have this conversation with you because you're right there. So thank you.
Thank you, Phyllis. So, how can people find you? I have your website, but do you want to just share a little bit about how they can order your book and find your website?
Yeah, my website is just my name, www.phyllisleavitt.com, and it's Phyllisleavitt. And I spell that because you can spell those names so many different ways.
Yeah.
Um, I'm on Facebook and LinkedIn and Twitter and YouTube and Instagram. And if you go, my book is in the publishing process right now. It's actually not coming out until next year. But
Okay.
if you go on my website right away, you'll see a place where you can sign in for my newsletter. And I've been writing weekly newsletters that I've really been putting my heart and soul into. You can sign up for my newsletter, and then you'll be on my mailing list, and you'll be the first one to know when you can pre-order my book, which I think will not be too far from now. And then certainly you'll be
Great.
the first to know when the book is available.
That's
Yeah.
awesome. I'd love a copy of your book actually
Yeah.
too. And I love spreading the word about, like loving kindness and how to, heal ourselves and each other and the planet. That's everything. So um, let's empower each other, support each other, and change the planet, right? Like, and hopefully sustain the planet. So we have a planet to live
We
on.
have a planet. Exactly.
Yeah, and definitely I'd love to have you on again. And thank you
Thank
so
you.
much for taking the time to be on my podcast. And if anyone wants to find me or learn more about my services and my weekly online gatherings, workshops, and programs, you can find me at vandanalightshealing.com. Everything will be in the comments below, how to find me, how to find Phyllis. And please like and subscribe to my channel if you like this video.
Great.
Thank you again, Phyllis. I wish you a
Thank you.
beautiful day. Blessings to you and see you soon.
See you soon. Thank you so
Bye
much.
bye for now.